Hello, and thanks for joining today. Today we're going to look at Capture Client, so Sonicwall Capture Client, essentially the endpoint solution we offer based off of the Sentinel One engine. And what we're going to essentially look at today is something that's called account scope. All right, so let's jump in there. All right, so for those of you who don't know me, I'm Kelvin Peters. I'm a solutions engineer out of California and Hawaii. We're always looking for feedback on these, content that we do produce here. So if there are any feedback or any ideas for upcoming webinars, feel free to drop me an email, kpeters@sonicwall.com. All right, so this is just a quick overview of the agenda. We're going to go through the account scope overview and what that's all about. We'll look at policy inheritance. We'll also look at groups and then overall kind of best practice on how to use the inheritance to get the most out of the product. All right, so account scope. This allows you to view, all your tenants or customers from within a single console, right? And you'll see there's some benefits, obviously, from being able to do that. One, obviously, we're going to talk about primarily in this session is the policy inheritance. But let's kind of rewind a bit. So we have the account dashboard. So this really gives you visibility into all the customers, all the tenants that you have underneath your control. You can manage devices, policies, and other operations from that hierarchy, from that account scope level. Again, the policy inheritance, that's you'll see at the bottom here. We can essentially, and we'll see that when we get into the UI, there's three different levels of inheritance. Okay, so the very first level is the account level. So this isn't tied to a specific customer or tenant. It's really just a set of policies that you can define and then use to inherit into the tenant or even into the groups that you do create. Okay, so a tenant in our world is equivalent to a customer. So every time we say tenant, we're really talking about a customer. All right, so let's jump ahead here. I know there's a lot of things going here on the slide here. So again, I just copied down here at the bottom that simple hierarchy, account, tenant, and groups. So you can see here on the left-hand side, this CC35 demo at the top here. This represents the account. So if I was to click on that and modify the policies, this is the account level context or policy, right? Underneath, you can see anywhere there's like this little person that represents a customer or tenant. Okay, and then under a specific customer or tenant, you can then define a series of groups, right? You don't necessarily need to, but some obvious reasons to do so is, if you need a specific policy on your Windows machines versus your Linux machines versus your Mac versus your Windows servers, for example, or even a single user. Okay, so you can create a policy for a single user. Maybe they need a special policy for a web exclusion, or maybe it's a specific application only that user or group of users use, right? So we're going to talk about groups a little bit further, but that's pretty much just a high level of how the hierarchy kind of works. Over on the right side, so you can see there's different policies. So under each, like the account scope here, I have the same list of policies as I do under the tenant and customer. And then also if I create a group, this is an example, group A or group B, could be a dynamic or a static group. It'll also have the same policies. So you can see, from the group level, I can inherit from the customer or tenant level, and then from the customer tenant level, I can inherit from the account level, right? So it allows you to, reuse, the policies from the account level down to the tenant customer, and then even down to the a specific group if you wanted to. You'll see there's probably there's likely some policies that make more sense that you would recycle. We're going to get to that when we dive into it a little bit further. But this is essentially what the hierarchy looks like and how the inheritance is going to work. And we're going to get into the UI. We're going to show you how you enable or disable inheritance, and we're going to look at the groups as well. All right. So as you can see here, I kind of already mentioned that you can create either a dynamic or a static group, and it allows you to then have a custom policy set for that given group, right? And you can see there's quite a few items that you can use to create a dynamic group. One of the obvious ones would be OS type, right? So I can say if the OS type is Windows or Windows Server or Linux or Mac, that would essentially create that dynamic policy set for the given group, right? So I can, as the machine comes online, based on its OS, I can apply a different set of policies, right? You can see there's quite a few other items you can use: current country, Active Directory group or users, even a MAC address or visible public IP, etc. It allows you to create groups dynamically and get the certain policies applied to the devices as needed. And of course, you can create a static group. So this could either be a device, so you add the devices you want into the group, or you add the users or user groups into the group, right? So that's two different groups that you can create, dynamic and static. We're going to look at that once we get into the console. We'll take a look at how you can create groups and manage them effectively. All right, so just some quick best practices. So always inherit from the account policy whenever possible, right? So obviously the fewer policies you have, the easier it is to manage. So policies that you can recycle from the tenant all the way down to the end group. You can essentially, allow for that. And we're going to look again at that once we get into the UI. Create global blacklist exclusions at the account policy level. So this is kind of a good example. Let's say, you're obviously, providing, services to an end customer. Maybe you're using the same backup solution across all your customers. If you needed an exclusion, for example, for that backup solution, you would create it at the account level, and then that exclusion would trickle down into all the policies or into all the exclusions for all the groups or tenants that you have. Create customer tenant blacklist exclusions at the customer tenant policy level. So example, a specific customer has a very specific application that's only used by that customer. You would, again, just create that exclusion at the customer or tenant level, right? So again, it's least specific, right? The account policy would be for being able to create an exclusion or a policy for everything kind of under your control, whereas the specific customer or tenant is specific to obviously a customer or tenant. And then group policies, we're going to see this again. So you'll see you can obviously create as many groups as you want, but you just have to keep in mind the order of operation. So it's going to be a top-down first match, right? So if a machine, comes online and it checks in to pull down a policy, it's going to take the first hit. So if you have a dynamic policy at the top saying, for my Windows machines, I want them to have this policy. If that's your first policy, it's going to hit that, and it's never going to hit anything below it. Okay, if it's a Windows machine, it's going to get that Windows policy. So obviously, if you had a specific policy for a specific user, you would want that group above the more generic one, in our case the Windows one, so that if it sees that that user is logged in, now it's going to take that policy regardless of if it's running Windows, right? So that's kind of how you'll see that when we look at it. It's going to be like a top-down kind of approach here. All right, so we'll bring the console over. And then let's take a look here, right? So this, you can see again, I'm at the account scope level, right? So anything at this level is specific to my account. It's going to give me an overview of all my customers underneath that. So you can see all my customers here. And I can click in on those, and those are really just going to bring me over to that specific UI for that specific customer. But some of the things I'll kind of point out here is when you're at the account level, if I go into something like threats, for example, I'm going to see all the threats for all the customers, right? So, I don't necessarily need to, be on a specific customer. And that kind of holds true too with the dashboard, right? So you saw on the dashboard, it had the list of all the customers, and it also, had, any, threats or anything that, might need attention, right? So that's pretty much how it is. You're going to see that the main part here we're going to spend is under policies. So this is, every time you create something at the top here, like a tenant, or if you create groups, you're essentially what's going to happen is it's going to give you a set of policies. So you'll see if I click in on this one, for example, all right, and I go to policies. So you'll see I'm on an actual customer or tenant at this point. I'm not currently inheriting. If I was to enable this inheritance, this will actually start to inherit the policy from the tenant or customer level policy. Okay, so we kind of saw that in our slide deck here. If I go back, right? So you can see it here, the inheritance, how it kind of plays out, and that's the same thing we're looking at in the UI here, right? So you can see if I enable inheritance, okay, it's going to say, are you sure? So now I'm inheriting from the very top level, right? So if I go here, you're going to see if I make a change here, for example, an update, and then if I go back to this one that was inheriting, you'll see that it also changed here, and it's grayed out, right? So I can't modify, for example, the client version here at this level unless I disable inheritance, right? So a lot of the time you likely want, all your installers to be the same. So this is one policy that you would likely use at the account level, and then you would, allow for the inheritance down to, all the policies on the side here, specifically the client, right? So if you go through, if I go to threat protection, you'll see inheritance is off because there's some custom settings here that aren't, necessarily the same as the top level. So if I want to, modify those to allow for different settings, this is how I would do it. Just simply disable inheritance, right? That holds true. Trusted certificates, even web content filtering, you'll see the inheritance, straight across the board. One thing that you'll notice if you go into blacklist, there's actually no inheritance. But what you'll see here is if you create a blacklist, it'll show you at what scope your blacklist is. Okay, so if I expand this out, I don't know if we'll see it. Might be under exclusions. I have one. So you'll see here I have these global ones, which are defined at the account scope. And then these ones here, actually these ones, sorry, are the account scope ones. These ones are just global from the actual software platform itself. But you'll see I can't modify this here. You can see it's grayed out. If I wanted to, modify that, I'd have to go to the account scope up at the top here, and then you'll see I can actually edit this line item. Okay, so that's how the the whitelist and blacklists kind of work. You define them at the different levels, and then they trickle down, right? So again, if you had something like an RMM tool or a backup tool, something that's common across all your customers, you would define it at the account level. If you were, looking for something that's customer specific, you would then, create it at the account level. And then, obviously, if there was something very specific for a very specific subset of machines, you would then create your exclusion or whitelist at the group level. All right, so what we're going to do here now is we're going to actually go into groups, which you can find under assets and then groups. And you'll see here, I did show you that list of, users and groups, groups that were associated with my tenants. That's actually the same list you would see underneath here, right? So if I actually go to the policy underneath the Sonicwall products, those are the same list of groups that we're looking at when we look at this group. So a group is really just a set of policies, and you can see from the group here, I can see which policies. There's 4 out of 7 policies inherited on this one, for example, and you can cookie cut that. So your groups can have one inherited policy. It could have the whole set of inherited policies, right? So when they're talking about 4 out of 7, they're actually referring to these over here. Okay, so that's essentially what you see. And again, these are from top down. So you'll notice I actually left this single machine at the bottom just as an example. But I have, these ones here where it's picking up, Windows servers, it's picking up Linux, it's picking up Mac, right? So if I had one that was picking up Windows specifically, which I don't, but if I did, what you'll see is this one, the policy would never actually take this one because it'll always hit the Windows one above and it will miss this one. So for demo kind of purposes, we'll go in here, we'll just create a group called Windows, okay? We'll do a dynamic group and we'll click on next. So here we're going to say OS type is Windows, okay? All right, we'll just finish next. Confirm. All right, so we should see this new one show up. So let's go back to policies, and we'll just take a quick look if we see that new one. So we do. We have that Windows one here. So we'll go back to the groups, and now we'll take a look. So my Windows one is below this one. I know this KP desktop is a Windows machine. So this is actually a good order. This would actually hit the Windows user, this specific machine, and it wouldn't hit the Windows one. But if I moved this policy up, essentially what would happen is this single machine policy would never ever hit because that machine is a Windows machine. It'll hit the Windows policy. So this is going to be the set that is pulled down every single time. Right? So just remember that there is some, order of operation here. You obviously put the most specific ones at the top. So again, a specific user, a specific machine, and then you kind of expand out. So if you have, a group of machines, you would put that below. So just keep in mind, you have to put a little bit of thought into that for the actual policies to apply correctly. Okay. So that's pretty much it for the inheritance. Again, I'll just bring this slide back up here. So just remember, you have 3 levels of inheritance: account, tenant, and groups. And that gives you a lot of granularity, a lot of flexibility in creating custom policy sets for your machines out there. So I hope this has been helpful. I know there's been a lot of requests to kind of run through something like this. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. If you're looking to get this enabled on your specific account, reach out to your sales team. They'll be able to get this requested and set up for you. Because I guess I should have mentioned that out of the box, it doesn't come enabled by default. So this is a specific thing that you have to request to be enabled on your account. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.